So thank you very much for signing up and to the session, what is it like to do a PhD in law at Ulster University? And I always like to start these sessions with our PhD researchers, who are the people obviously at the center of our PhD research environment, and very much part of the intellectual engine that drives our work at the university. So the first half of the session, about 40-45 minutes, will be a chance to hear from our PhD researchers, Roua Al-Taweel and Micheál Hearty, and then Leah, who is just running a few minutes late. And they'll tell us just a bit about their research and their background, why they came to Ulster, why you should or might want to consider doing a PhD at Ulster University. And then we'll have a bit of time for any questions you may have for them. And then a bit later, at about 2:45, we'll have some of the staff join us to talk about the different areas of research strength in the university and law, and to talk about the different funding opportunities that we have and what we look out for in PhD research proposals. So that's the format. I suppose we can then hand over to Roua to introduce herself and say a bit about doing a PhD at Ulster.
Yes, thank you, Rory. And hi, everyone. I am Roua Al-Taweel, originally from Syria, and I'm doing my second year of PhD now at Transitional Justice Institute. I'm working on the nexus of forced displacement and gender discriminatory legal frameworks in the context of Syria, particularly focusing on its impact on socioeconomic injustices. This would include, for example, the land, housing, property, education, health, and employment. So how did I end up here or doing what I'm doing now, and why at the Transitional Justice Institute? Initially, I was at the time of the application, I was based in London, and initially I narrowed my research for universities in London. So me coming across Transitional Justice Institute was kind of a coincidence, but a happy one, and I'm really grateful for. It's through the Ulster University's Doctoral College in Harborne, where that directed me to the university website, where I learned about Transitional Justice Institute. So at that stage, I was interested in and really ready to pursue my PhD. I had my proposal ready, so I've thought about everything. My proposal was coming from a result of multiple years of working in the context of Syria and exploring gender dynamics and the gender experiences. So kind of was informed by lived experience and also professional experience. When I came across the Transitional Justice Institute, I realized it's I chose it because it's an important institute in transitional justice field with leading experts in the field. The program that I applied for, Gender and Transitional Justice, was a great match for my proposal that I couldn't believe it at the time. So it was perfect match. Also, I like the multidisciplinary approach, given that I don't have a legal background, but I was still interested in contributing to the scholarship around transitional justice and the conversation around meaningful transition anyways, and these legal frameworks. So so this multidisciplinary approach allows me space to be part of the institute, and also made it less intimidating to come into a field that I didn't have background in. So I think also another thing was that everything was in one place, instead of having to apply for the program and the scholarship separately, which was the case in other universities. You submit one application and indicate your wish to be considered for scholarship. The other thing was during the application time was quick responses and human touch in communication, because I came to learn. I'm not from the UK, So I came to learn that there are different systems for application and different universities, and some of these you need to identify a supervisor and agree with them on proposal before submitting the application. So I thought that was the case at Ulster University. So I contacted the professor who kindly clarified that that wasn't the case, and also gave me helpful comments on to improve my proposal. So I thought in comparison to other correspondence that I had at that time, this was very quick and helpful. Elsewhere, I was redirected to main websites where I had to start the search over myself. It wasn't very easy for me to always navigate some of the websites, and sometimes I didn't even get a response. So communication, I think, is really important, because time in the period of the application is also a very important factor. Some of the benefits that I got after joining would be a sense of being part of this community of academics who share values and working for similar cause, justice in different contexts in the world. The supervisory team that I'm working with, I think I like the fact that I'm being challenged, but without having tension or making me feel less or anything like this. So it's done in a very constructive way. Everyone I've met so far at uni, whether at the doctoral college, at the library, at the Wellbeing Center, was very supportive and warm. And we tend to underestimate the importance of warmth and compassion in professional communication, but I think that's one thing I value a lot. So these are some of the points. I think like we can discuss more with the Q&A. I just wanted to highlight this to start with. Thanks.
Thank you, Roua. So we'll hear from Micheál and then Leah, and then we'll go to Q&A. So Micheál.
Yep, thanks, Rory. Hi, everyone. I'm Micheál. I'm in what's hoping to be my last year. My project is based on the memorialisation of what's termed non-combatants in NI. So looking at the memory making process and stuff like this. In terms of why UU, it was really down to two reasons. The first is that there's the academic staff fit the project profile particularly well, and I could learn I could learn a lot and develop from a scholar within the UU and the TTI. The second is that my brother completed a project or a PhD at the TTI, and he highly recommended the TTI as an institute and UU as a university. In terms of why I would recommend also, I think it was a real sentiment about the peer support you get at UU. In the TTI, there's a good community support straight through. So even if you're on third year, you get third years interact with first years, second years interact. It's all mixed and supportive. And then there's a wider support network within the doctoral colleges and the humanities and arts, humanities and social sciences. There's support networks there. But there's also great support for post-PhD provided by the institution. So talks about exploring early career development in academia and trying to get your head around and understand moves post-PhD, which I find really helpful. Especially as I near the end of the PhD process.
Thanks, Micheál. So Leah, your turn.
Thank you, Rory, and hi everyone. So my name is Leah, and similar to Micheál, I am also in the final year of my PhD at the TJI School of Law of Ulster University. I won't bore you with the full title of my PhD, but essentially I'm looking at the relationship between constitutional conventions established by devolution and the progression of human rights standards in Northern Ireland. And I suppose to answer the question of why did I apply to Ulster University, when I was completing my second master's at Queen's University in Belfast, I was interested in the idea of pursuing further study, and I realised that to undertake a PhD is obviously quite a significant journey, and it's really important that you have the appropriate supports in place, be that your supervisory team, the wider senior staff at an institute, and also just having supports in place to help you become the best researcher that's possible. And that primarily comes from being in a place which specialises in your research interests that you hope to pursue in this project. So when I was completing my master's, I started researching the staff that were in place at Queen's because I knew the university, but I also started to research the staff that were in place in TJI at Ulster. And I soon realised that in terms of the research interests, the expertise that was available at Ulster was just perfect for what I was trying to pursue around human rights progression, but in the devolved context and wider constitutional arrangements in the United Kingdom. And it's quite funny for me, I've joked with my supervisory team about this, but when I was researching the staff that were available at TJI and I came across my supervisory team, Dr. Anne Smith and Dr. Mark Simpson, I remember thinking to myself, they would be fantastic supervisors for me because of the research interests that they have and what they've published on to date. And what I also really appreciated with TJI was the fact that they run the annual competition for studentships and funding positions. As Roua has talked about, what is so unique about Ulster that I can see is that firstly, the application is very straightforward and there's a lot of advice given around that. But secondly, the application for scholarship support is combined within that process, and that therefore means you can focus much more on your research proposal. The application for a scholarship doesn't detract from your focus, and that should be the main focus, obviously, of your application. The process is also very well clearly documented. I knew that I would have to, what I had to put in by way of documentation, but also what to expect for the interview. And what I really appreciated as well was that compared to friends that I have who've also undergone through the process, the interview was also just a very interesting discussion. I found it much more focused around my research proposal, what I myself was interested in, and we had a really good theoretical discussion. And I instantly felt that this was the atmosphere and the learning environment that would be best fit for me, and I would be able to undertake a project within this environment. And then, of course, the allocation of the supervisory team, I actually did get my supervisory team that I had hoped for, which worked out very well. And I think the support structure that's been in place for me for the last 2.5 years has been exemplary. And you're also encouraged within TJI to make the most of other opportunities that are available. It's an excellent institution for flagging up conferences, workshops, but also support for researchers who are interested in pursuing that. I know there are different staff I could contact if I were interested in applying for a conference or to prepare an abstract, for example, or in preparing a conference paper. It's a place where I think staff are very open about sharing their experiences and supporting the next generation of researchers coming through. And that's really important in this type of journey, particularly as Micheál has said, if you're not quite too sure what you want to do post-PhD life, you know that there's supervisors around and other staff around to support and advise you in that. Whilst you can also focus on your research, I think it's exemplary. And then just in wider benefits, I know it's been alluded to, but at Ulster in particular, the doctoral college is exemplary in the support structure it can provide, be that through a whole variety of training programs, and also opportunities to pursue representative roles, if that's something that you're interested in as well, being more active in campus life in that researcher representative capacity, it is available to you as well. And then I suppose just lastly, the socialisation aspect. I know we've all struggled with that in recent years because of COVID, but there definitely is a very strong researcher community at Ulster, be that through the doctoral college more widely and also in the School of Law, and there'll be different events organised throughout the year, be it more practical around training, conference presentations, interview skills, for example, but also just more social. You can have different talks of experts coming in to give it their professional experience. So it's been a really beneficial opportunity for me. And I think it's because it's so well-rounded from your research to be undertaken, wider skills-based support that's available to you, including teaching opportunities, but also just feeling that you're part of a community and that you're valued as a member of that community as well.
Well, thank you very much, Leah and Roua and Micheál, for kicking us off this afternoon. A great start. And so we want to give our participants then a chance to ask our PhD researchers any questions they may have about the process or why they want to do a PhD or things to think about before embarking on this quite important project. So if anyone has a question or an observation, feel free to turn on your microphone, camera as well if you like, bearing in mind we are recording, and ask the question. Or put it in the chat box if you can't put on your mic for some reason. Saul, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Rory, and thanks to the PhD researchers who have given a very useful summary of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Is it possible for one or more of you to speak to the differences between the application process for the other funded PhDs or PhD programs like 9 and Northern Bridge? Just some sort of idea of comparison, and also from your own experience, if you did proceed along those routes as well, how that worked, why you didn't, if you didn't, etc. So just some sort of idea on comparison and between or among those funded programs and Ulster, of course.
Yeah. So Saul, I think we're going to be talking more about that in the second half of the session when we'll have Professor Karen Fleming, who's the Ulster Director of Northern Bridge, coming along. And so in relation to the Northern Bridge and the 9 DTPs, I think most of that we can talk about later, if you don't mind. I don't think Roua, Micheál, or Leah, any of you were involved in the DTPs, so probably you may not want to comment on that. I mean, is there anything else you want to comment on in relation to Saul's question? Are you happy for us to take it up when we have Karen around later? Okay. So Saul, if you don't mind, you may have other questions for them, but that is something we will talk about a bit later. And then we have a question from Noemi, is that right? Or?
It's yeah, Naomi, it's fine as well. Hi, I am currently on placement and I'm doing law on Micheál campus with Ulster University. And I am thinking about doing PhD, but I'm also conflicted if I want to actually go qualified and be a solicitor. So I'm sorry if I missed that part of any of you talking about this previously, but I had difficulty with connection here. But what you was thinking about kind of, doing both, if doing PhD and getting qualified in the same kind of time, or do you think about getting qualified on any point, or just you want to go strictly academic?
Thank you very much. Any of our PhD researchers want to talk about that? And it does raise an interesting question because those are quite big choices to have to make.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Because now I'm doing, I am on placement with PSNI in their corporate information branch. So, and I'm just thinking about what I would actually want to do after graduation, and obviously the standard route is or go qualified as solicitor or going to the bar. But then I was thinking I think so maybe academic will be more better job for me, especially now with my job on placement is involve a lot of research. So I was just wonder what was your thinking, if you was ever thinking about getting qualified, or just you was thinking of strictly to academic?
Okay, well, why don't we put that to our PhD researchers and maybe think about why did you want to do a PhD and what are your career plans afterwards? Because I don't know if any of you were dealing with the question that Naomi had to deal with, but tell us a bit more about why you wanted to do a PhD and what you're hoping to do afterwards. And maybe that will help Naomi think through the decisions she has to make. Roua, do you want to start?
I was still thinking about that. It's a very good question. I think for me, I was at the stage where I've done some work. So I come from professional background, and I started my PhD at the age of 34. So basically, I think I was ready to take the knowledge and the expertise that I've accumulated working in the field and try to develop it and build on the scholarship in the field. So in that sense, I would say that I don't see these two things as separate, but like rather than extension to each other's and continuous kind of efforts into. I am interested in academia. I think of myself as a researcher. So, and I see of myself as such. Even before I pursue my PhD, I was involved in research work. So I guess this is part of why I pursue my academic career. I don't know yet what my plans are after the PhD, but I definitely see myself as part of the academia, working with theories and with trying to build up on the scholarship. That's connected more or less to the field as well, because this is one thing that I try to do all the time. It's like how to have a dynamic relationship between activism and grassroots and the field, as well with the scholarship and academia. If that makes sense. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Roua.
Micheál, you want to?
Yeah. I can't really speak directly to a choice between becoming a qualified solicitor and going to academia because I don't come from a law background, but I was kind of faced with a similar decision in the run-up to getting a PhD. I had offers to work for accounting firms and stuff like this, more industry based clubs. But once the PhD offer came in, I kind of jumped on it because I genuinely just enjoyed resourcing, and it's something that I feel I'd be more passionate about. And it was kind of, it's kind of saying that find the club you love and you don't work a day in your life kind of saying. My advice would be maybe do a dissertation, and if you enjoy your dissertation, then the PhD would probably be will probably speak to you more, will probably be more natural for you, because that's probably more like the work that you'd be doing in a PhD would be this independent resourcing, reading theory instead of going to class. So maybe if you enjoy your dissertation, and maybe lean towards more academia.
Yes, thank you, Michael. It's actually obviously I'm before dissertation, but while I'm doing essays or problem questions now on my course, I'm very enjoying like actually researching and like spending time in library. So that's why it was like thinking me like, okay, if you're enjoying like writing something about like some subjects, maybe you actually like be better pursuing to the academia than actually go with the original plan to be solicitor. So I am very conflicted in that, but thank you.
Leah, what about you?
Naomi, I hear your question so well, and it resonates with me because when I was between my, I studied law as an undergrad degree, and when I was between my undergrad degree and my first master's, I was in a similar predicament to yourself, where I wasn't quite too sure what I wanted to use my law degree for and my research skills for. And long story short, I ultimately took a variety of jobs that were research based in different offices, and I realized that I was much more gauged towards understanding policy frameworks and legislative processes. I joke to my friends, I have a number of friends who work in the fields of law, pardon me, and I would frequently joke to them that I prefer to know how laws are made than how they are applied necessarily in a court of law. Like, I like to analyze that, but I wouldn't want to be the one arguing how it should be applied. I want to be the one who understands how it needs to be changed in a process, in a procedure base. So I suppose my thing to you would be, think about what your areas of strengths are, or what your research interests would be, and take your time, because the qualification route, for depending on what jurisdiction obviously you wish to practice in, can be quite time consuming, and it can be quite expensive as well. Micheál has talked about, undertake a dissertation. You've said that that's what you're interested in, the research areas that you're interested in. That's how I found what I would like to do. And I know with undertaking a PhD, for me, the ultimate end goal would be probably to work in policy and policy design, because I know that's what I'm interested in. I want to formulate responses and address gaps in legislation or policy that currently exists. I don't necessarily want to practice that. And that was a process for me. And that's something that I found through different areas of employment, and also through undertaking the PhD itself. So it's absolutely a journey, and feel free to take your time to discover that in your own pace and at your own time. And also, if you're, I was fortunate enough to have a scholarship for this PhD, which has allowed me to do that. And I realized that I have the fortune to have that. But understand what your interest could be in and what your skill set is, and that can absolutely set you on your way. And that, like I said, is what's happened with me with my employment history to date. And now as I undertake the PhD, and the more I discover in my area of research as well, makes me realize, yes, there's definitely issues, and I would love to focus on further research in that field, and also maybe ultimately policy making off the back of that as well.
Thank you very much, Leah. This is very helpful what you're saying. Yeah, I am like where we was talking in class about laws, what was made, for example, in the 18th century. I also find interesting how they change in the time and progress, and how they work at now. So I totally understand this interest. And yeah, thank you very much. Anyway, thank you all of you for your answers. I much appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, and very, very interesting to get that more rounded picture of why you're doing what you're doing and where you hope to be going, all of you. And that also feeds into some of the questions from SB in the chat box there. So there's two questions. One, is it possible to transfer from part-time to full-time? And two, could I get a job at a law firm during the PhD journey? So, I mean, we'll talk a bit more about that later, but we do offer, so for different, well, if you are self-funded, so if you're paying for your PhD yourself, you can do that either full-time or part-time. If you are going for one of the DTP studentships, it is possible to do those part-time. At the moment, as far as I know, it's not possible to apply to do an Ulster studentship part-time. But if there are equal opportunities reasons, reasonable accommodation requests that arise during the course of a PhD, it may be possible to request permission to transfer to a part-time basis. Could you get a job at a law firm during the PhD journey? If you're doing a PhD part-time, I'm sure Roua, Micheál, Leah, you'd agree this is doing a PhD full-time is a full-time 40, 50-hour week, maybe more occupation in effect. So you certainly couldn't do those, and it would be prohibited by the terms and conditions, both full-time. I mean, if you were doing a PhD part-time, then yes, you could of course take up other employment outside of the PhD, and some people do switch to a PhD part-time in order to facilitate that. Okay. Any other questions for our PhD researchers while we have them with us? What's the most exciting or interesting thing you've had occasion to do during your PhD? Maybe we'll start with Leah this time and mix it up.
Oh, that's a tough one, Rory. And I suppose there are two things I would have to say, because I can never just narrow it down to one, and for different reasons. Firstly, one of the most exciting things because of the fact it was the transition back to campus, was helping out with the Festival of PhD Research when it was based at the Belfast campus in May this year, and to have the opportunity to volunteer with the doctoral college to help arrange the facilities in the Belfast campus, but also having the opportunity to chair a panel as well as to present at a panel was really exciting for me, just to see the wider body of research that's undergoing, the extent of the community that's present at the Belfast campus, and to hear everyone else's research that was underway, plus get feedback and questions put to me from my presentation. I really, really enjoyed. And I suppose on top of that, oh goodness, it's just really hard to pick off the top of my head, but I think also having the opportunity to teach, to help out as a teaching assistant, simply because for a start, you get to live on the other side of the classroom and turn the tables on students and have throwback memories to your undergrad and postgrad days. But there's just something really nice about, perhaps if you're studying theory or you're writing something to do with theory for your own research, to then be put into a classroom environment where you get to teach that theory or you get to teach that subject to other students, because I think it also helps you understand your area a bit more. But it's very nice to know that you can help cultivate other learning interests, and that I think helps you see academic journeys in a greater context, and that how you support other people in their learning doesn't just support you, but it can also start a new community of researchers coming through. So it sounds a bit cliched, but for me, that's been something I've really enjoyed doing. It's also been quite exciting just to see, to get the feedback from other students and be part of that community, but also helping out with the doctoral college with the festival. I've really enjoyed. And hopefully we'll be able to do so again next year, but we'll see, time commitments providing.
And I think, Leah, thank you for that. I think you're also being modest and not mentioning, if I remember correctly, you won the prize for your presentation at the festival. So congratulations again on that. We're always glad when one of ours secures recognition for their wonderful work. Micheál, same question for you. What's the most exciting or interesting thing you've had occasion to do during your PhD?
Yeah, today I probably have to go with teaching, same as Leah. I think it's just really interesting because you kind of like just create an output, as in you think of how you can communicate ideas to people, and I kind of started on, I just leave it to a Friday because it's quite a nice thing to do, to think of how to break down concepts and how to activities to show people to explain concepts, and you can see sometimes by the facial expression how you've helped people's critical analysis in that moment. And then plus when you go to essays and you see the points, you're like, oh, they've actually listened to me. It's quite nice. But I think the most exciting thing I'd be looking forward in the coming months is helping out with the SLSA conference in McKeever. I think it's going to be interesting, and this massive conference and being a part of organizing it, and again, it's the conference being in person again. It's something I'm really looking forward to in the coming months.
Can you say a bit more about what SLSA is, Micheál? I suppose not everyone will know what that is.
Yeah, it's the Social Legal Studies Association. It's a massive association based in social legal studies. It's, I believe, the second biggest conference in the UK. People come from all universities all around the UK come to it. There's massive streams. There's also a postgraduate resource sessions and get-togethers, so you get to meet other PhD students from all around the UK and maybe even from Ireland. It's just a massive conference.
Yes, thank you, Micheál. So, as you say, Ulster is hosting this in our McGee campus in Derry, Londonderry. I think this is only the second time SLSA has come to Northern Ireland. So we're very pleased to have that opportunity. So, Roua, exciting and interesting thing you've done during your PhD journey.
Well, I think the highlight would be I have few actually, but the highlight would be like being part of the coordination team of What's the Crack. So What's the Crack is an informal seminar series that we PhD students kind of like coordinate and arrange and share. And as someone who is maybe more like leaning into the introversion side and like to do stuff on their own behind the desk, it was like really good opportunity for me to be part of a very supportive team to start with, but also to take an active role into coordinating seminars, communicating with experts and professors at the TJI, and also PhD researchers, because we had the opportunity to also share our research and discuss it, and sharing the sessions. So it helps on so many different levels, and I find it very, very interesting, like to be part of it. Also, there is the FST, which is the first steps to teaching. So I'm also grateful because I got this opportunity in my second year. So it is like very soon that we are undertaking these trainings to be ready to for teaching to get the qualifications necessary. Being part of different networks, whether like it is directly related to our research or like an aspect of our research that was facilitated differently through TJI and through being part of Ulster University. So these are 3 examples that came to my top of my head, but I'm sure there are many others.
Thank you, Roua. So we have time for one last question for our researchers, if any of you have any more. And well, in that case, maybe Roua, Micheál, Leah, do you have any last words for potential applicants for a PhD at Ulster?
I suppose for me, key piece of advice would be take the time to prepare your application. It's not something that can be rushed. Whenever you're asked to write a research proposal, obviously there are key sections. I mean, all sections are key, but how you outline your research aims, your methods, your theory, the context, it will take time. And I would also urge for anybody who's interested in this to reach out and contact staff. The staff are more than happy to discuss potential research proposals and answer any questions that you might have. And it's really beneficial to hear from their insight and their advice in the process. To make sure that you have all the documentation, you will have to also submit a cover letter as well as other transcripts and so on. And that can take time to prepare as well, and to make sure you have that in advance. And I suppose then if you're shortlisted for interview, go along and be yourself. I think sometimes there's a tendency to assume that, you know, maybe particularly from a Northern Irish context, to be self-deprecating and not think that you're able to do something like this. If you've been shortlisted for interview, obviously the team believe that, the panel believe that you have the skills and capabilities, and you also have an interesting proposal. So just be prepared to go along to talk on that proposal and to turn it, like I did, into a conversation, and you're much more relaxed. And I think it showcases you at your best, as well as demonstrating your own real genuine interest in your subject matter and your proposed subject expertise. So ensure that you plan thoroughly for the process and prepare when you can. And then if you are accepted, you will hit the ground running in September. And also be prepared to have to constantly revisit that research proposal. I think, I'm not too sure what Roua and Micheál would think, but I think maybe initially in the first couple of months, there's a tendency to consider your research proposal as your baby, and you think it's perfect and doesn't need to change. It absolutely has to change, and it will change naturally with your supervisory team support and as you to undertake all the research, particularly in your first and your second year.
Thank you, Leah. Roua or Micheál, any last word?
I think Leah kind of summarized very well, like the advice, like that I would have given as well. But just to say that a year and a half in my PhD, and I am like more and more convinced that I made the right decision in joining TJI and Ulster University. And I hope that you find it as the place for you as well. And as Leah said, if you needed any help and support, please contact staff members, and also don't hesitate to reach out even for PhD students and researchers as well.
Thank you, Roua. Micheál, last words?
Yeah, I think like every piece of work, the most important thing is feedback. So get in contact with someone, ask them to read it. There might be constructive input to enhance it and improve it. But same as you, I think as you gradually move on to the PhD, you do realize that it is you made a complete right decision. And yeah, it's a highly enjoyable experience and a very interesting one at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much, Micheál, Roua, Leah. That was really great. Oh, sorry, I do see there is a question in from SB. Is there a general project in the law section that allows studying as part of the project? So SB, and maybe we can come back to that later. I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. So maybe we can take it up in the latter part of the webinar. And if you can just think, is there another way to just explain what you're asking? I'm not entirely sure what the right answer to that would be. We are going to be joined by some of my colleagues. I see Karen Fleming and Gráinne McKeever have already signed in, and Cath Collins. So welcome to them. I'm going to suggest we can say goodbye to Roua, Micheál, and Leah, and thank you very much for that discussion. It was really great to hear you. And maybe if we could take a 2-minute break and then come back and hear from myself and my colleagues more about the PhD process. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. Well, then I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Hi all, welcome back. You can see my PowerPoint, I take it. Saul, can you see the PowerPoint there?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you very much and welcome back. So in the second half of the session, we're going to hear from myself a bit and some of my colleagues. So I'm joined by Professor Karen Fleming, who is in charge of the Northern Bridge DTP. Professor Gráinne McKeever, Professor of Law and Social Justice, co-director of the Ulster University Law Clinic, Professor Siobhán Wills, Professor of Law and Director of the Transitional Justice Institute, and also Professor Cath Collins, who is one of our PhD coordinators and who works alongside me in my role as Research Director. So we will each have a bit to say just about the PhD opportunities and processes and different areas of strengths that you might be interested in. And then we will try to have some more time for any Q&A before we finish up at 3:30. So to talk a little bit then about doctoral research in law, and what is a PhD? What are the processes and opportunities? Why come to Ulster? And talk a little bit about, and here I'll hand over hopefully to Cath, to talk about PhD proposals, because we all have gathered from what Leah and her colleagues were saying at the end, the PhD proposal is a very important part of the process. And the PhD is, as we were saying earlier, a very big commitment. It is a 3-year, often 4-year full-time commitment and is longer, typically 6 years or maybe a bit longer if you are going down the PhD route. It does involve writing a substantial 80 to 100,000 word thesis that aims to make an original contribution to human knowledge, so telling us something new and significant. And people do PhDs for different reasons. This is why it was interesting to hear from our PhD researchers earlier about why they wanted to do a PhD. And I think it's important to reflect on for people like Naomi, who was explaining what kind of career options she was thinking about. There's different reasons to do a PhD. One reason is the intellectual satisfaction that is involved in doing your own research, designing your own project, saying something that is new, something that is significant, and something that adds to the sum total of human knowledge in a rigorous manner. And there's a great deal of satisfaction involved in that. Other people, or indeed the same people, will also derive satisfaction, see a reason for doing a PhD in the hope and expectation that through the research can make a contribution to knowledge and to society. So as you'll have gathered from the descriptions of the research projects our researchers talked about, many of them are very much concerned with the particular social, political, legal problem and what research can tell us about dealing with that problem. So there's certainly an ambition to be of practical relevance to society as well as contributing to knowledge. A PhD may also be relevant depending on what you're thinking of doing in terms of career development. So certainly if people are thinking about an academic career in many jurisdictions, including this one, a PhD is fairly important in terms of developing an academic career. Other career pathways are certainly possible because one of the things that a PhD does is that it includes quite a lot of transferable skills. So transferable research skills, presentation skills, communication skills that can be very relevant and useful outside of academia, certainly in relation to research in other areas, be it in civil society or in the public sector, or with international organizations. We have a number of different opportunities to do PhDs at Ulster. All of them are detailed on our Doctoral College Find a PhD website. We divide opportunities into self-funded opportunities and funded studentships. So self-funded PhDs mean that you pay for them yourself, or you may have some source of funding external to the university, some sponsor external to the university that will pay for you. But essentially the idea is you pay for these PhD costs yourself. And if you are going down the self-funded route, two significant features about that are that you can apply at any time of year. So whereas the funded studentships all have set deadlines, and so we consider them at set points during the year, if you want to consider a self-funded PhD, you can apply whenever you are ready to do so. And with self-funded PhDs, you can also apply to do them full-time or part-time. So that also, of course, makes it more viable, both economically and in terms of time, if you do have another job. And as we talked about a bit earlier, it'd certainly be ill-advised to try and do a full-time PhD and a full-time or even a part-time job on top of a full-time PhD. So we have a few different funded studentships. We have the Ulster competition, the Ulster Studentship competition, and this includes DFE, Department for the Economy, studentships, and BCRS, Vice Chancellor's Research studentships. Key difference for these is that DFE studentships, due to residence requirements, are typically for home applicants, whereas BCRS, I think they may now have been rebranded BCRB, BCRS studentships are open to international applicants. They're usually advertised in December. We've actually moved that forward a bit. We opened the studentship competition on the 30th of November with a deadline in February. So the deadline for all of the Ulster main studentship competitions are in February. And then as part of that, we'll have an interview for shortlisted applicants in April. The entry criteria for the Ulster studentships include that you have or should have expect to obtain a first or second class degree in a relevant subject. There is some flexibility about those criteria depending on particular circumstances. But it's crucial to know that when we're looking at those studentship applications, and we applied the same criteria to self-funded applications, we are looking at your academic performance. So certainly we're interested in the quality of your degree and other relevant experience, your research proposal, and the fit with supervisors. So those are the three things that we mainly look at when assessing studentship applications under the Ulster competition or for self-funded applications. And the research proposal is particularly important because, in a sense, there's not much you can do about your qualifications. They are what they are. The fit with your supervisors, again, the supervisors are the people we have on our staff. You can't do much about those. But what you can do a lot with, of course, is your research proposal. This is really where you can make sure that you can put forward a strong proposal that will interest potential supervisors and that will reassure the panel that you have a viable proposal that can be done in the requisite timeframe. So that's why we'll say a bit more about the research proposal later in this presentation. But do think about the supervisors, because when you do a PhD, your most important professional relationship is with your supervisors. So think about who do you want to work with for the next 3 years or 6 years, if you're thinking about doing the PhD part-time. Do a bit of research on your supervisors or potential supervisors. See especially who is publishing on your topic or in areas closely related to your topic. So the people who will be most likely to be engaged with the subject matter of your topic, be familiar with the up-to-date literature, and will have the resources and networks to help guide you through the project. You do also may want to think about things like availability of supervisors. It may be the case, of course, that some people have big research grants and lots of publications, but perhaps for that reason already have quite a lot of PhD research students to supervise. And so my grandson just made a guest appearance, though he was told not to, but anyway, Joshua says hello, everyone. So it may well be the case that big names won't be able to supervise a project because they're already overcommitted. Do feel free to contact potential supervisors and get advice on your research proposal. I mean, it may be that as potential supervisors, for different reasons, will feel they can't comment on a particular proposal. But if they do see that there is something of merit in the proposal that they would want to be involved in supervising, then they're certainly free to offer advice on your proposal. And as one of our supervisors was saying earlier, it's really valuable to get feedback on any work, but especially a PhD research proposal. And then, just as I already mentioned, for our self-funded applicants and for people looking at the main Ulster studentships, the DFE and the VCRS, or VCRB now, there is an interview as part of that process for shortlisted applicants. As well as those opportunities, we are part of two Research Council UK funded doctoral training partnerships, or DTPs, one of which is the 9 Northern Ireland Northeast ESRC DTP partnership, and the other is Northern Bridge Consortium AHRC Arts Humanities Research Council DTP scholarships, which involve universities in here in Northern Ireland and in the northeast of England. These have earlier deadlines than the DFE and VCRS awards, and they are extremely competitive. So I'm particularly pleased that Professor Karen Fleming is able to join us and say a bit about one of these DTPs, the Northern Bridge Consortium. So Karen, over to you. Karen, we can't hear you. Well, I can't hear you. No. You're not, yeah, I don't know what the issue is, Karen. It's not at our end as far as I can tell. Karen, maybe I'll just continue, and if you can see if you can note, well, if you can't get it sorted, don't worry, but if you can, just jump in and let us know at any point. And so we do have, as I say, the AHRC Northern Bridge, and you know, all of the details are on that PowerPoint there, and especially note again that the deadline is much earlier than for the Ulster DFE and VCRS competition, and that it is a multi-stage process. So you have to apply to Ulster first, and then if you make it through that stage, there is a submission to the consortium. And as part of that, you need to work with your supervisors.
Can you hear me, Rory?
Yes, Karen, great.
Sorry.
I was no doubt making, oh, you're breaking up a bit, Karen.
I'm sorry, I rejoined on my iPad, so maybe that's
okay.
Better. So yeah, I'm really pleased to have this chance to talk to you all. Northern Bridge is one of 2 DTPs that we have, and they're both across the same consortium of universities. Northern Bridge is for arts and humanities subjects. It's funded by the AHRC, and 9 is for social sciences. So although you can apply to both, and you should also, I always say, always apply to the other Ulster opportunities as well, you should customise your application to the place that you're applying to. So one of the differences with Northern Bridge is that you write the project rather than us advertising a project for you to apply to. So you need to, in discussion usually with supervisors, you develop your own project, and we're very open to that, including interdisciplinary methods or including creative practice methods. That might not be so relevant in law, but you would be surprised sometimes at what people bring to a PhD studentship application that's outside of their title on their undergraduate degree. So we have standard and collaborative doctoral awards for studentships. A standard award is what it sounds like. You apply with a project, you get a little bit more funding with Northern Bridge studentship, so you get 3.5 years of stipend and fees, and then you also have an option for another up to 6 months of stipend and fees for a placement that you apply to have it approved, but we rarely turn them down if they look feasible. And the placement can be very important because it can include training or personal development that is not so relevant to your PhD. It is not another 6 months of time working on your PhD. It's 6 months to go and do something else to develop you. So you could be working in a completely different environment, adding to your employability or to your development for after the PhD. And that can be funded. It can be in more than one place. So typically students would look for somewhere local for the bulk of that 6 months, and then they might have a shorter period of international placement. We probably couldn't afford for you to be in a lovely apartment in New York for 6 months, but we certainly have funded researchers to be overseas for 2 or 3 weeks of placement. So the deadline is looming. It's the start of January, and you apply initially to Ulster University in the normal Ulster University system, and you flag that it's the Northern Bridge studentship you want to apply to. And then we write, we filter those to make sure that anything we're forwarding is a feasible and viable project, but we don't expect it to be absolutely perfect at that point when you apply on the 10th of January, because you then have about a month to write a nomination form with your supervisors. And there's some extra bits of information that are needed in that application process that your supervisors would also help you with. So you can see the criteria include not just assessing the proposal, but also assessing you as an applicant, including things that you may bring to the project that may reflect on equality and diversity or on other experience outside of your undergraduate qualifications and your master's qualifications. It's very difficult, I think, to get through a very competitive process without a master's, but it's not impossible if you have a lot of equivalent professional experience. So if you don't have a master's, don't be put off by that if you've got equivalent professional experience, and we would work with you on how you express that and how your references might express that in your application. The difference between the DTPs is we're also assessing the supervision. So your supervisors also are assessed for a smaller amount of the marks. Most of the marks are on the proposal, and the training and research environment is also assessed. And in return for that, you get everything that you would have with an Ulster studentship or with self-funding at Ulster, but you also have access to additional training through the consortium. There are a couple of conferences every year. We lay on quite a lot of training opportunities. Researchers can also suggest training or have identified key speakers or key aspects of the development that they would like us to organise training on. And there's a greater amount of research training support grant available to you, up to about £6,000 plus half of the Ulster RTSG. So you get the best of both worlds, but it is very competitive. We have had success in law. So Rory has taken a few people through this process successfully, so we can do it. It is doable. First year PhD researchers who are already studying at Ulster can also apply in their first year. They can't apply after first year. And we expect then to see about 3 months of full-time work and training evident in the application. So you're not assessed as exactly the same as someone applying fresh, because you've had from September to January to work on the project. But that really only is 3 months of extra work. So that can also be something you consider. And you can study full-time or part-time, and we also have the flexibility to switch back and forth. So some things can happen in life, especially in 3 or 4 years of study. You can switch to part-time if you've started full-time, and the other way around. You can't switch back and forth, 2 or 3 times a year, but you can switch from part-time to full-time. And we're also flexible to it not having to be 0.5. You can actually be 0.6 or 0.4 if that works. Usually this is to fit in with either family commitments or other employment. So we're very flexible in that regard. And this year we also have 2 new awards that are particularly looking at EDI. Particularly, the criteria are the same. It's not giving anything to any of the lesser candidate, but we're particularly keeping an eye on how we assess EDI and making sure that that is a transparent part of our process. And I believe 9 have the same. They also have some EDI studentships. And we're particularly welcoming, of course, especially in law, of projects that might have an EDI or equality aspect to them. So I've tried to capture in one slide everything that I thought were the key points. We have got 67 studentships, which is huge. They are very competitive. The main criteria is quality. They're not allocated to subjects or to universities. And there's a lot more information on the Northern Bridge website. And there's a lot of guidance on how to fill in the form. The word counts are very challenging, but having written some of these before, Rory and I and other colleagues will help you with making sure that you say all the important things that you need to say in the quite demanding word counts. And you don't get interviewed, but you do have 2 references. Collaborative doctoral awards are slightly different. In those, you have an industry partner who's going to supervise this project with you. And there are 2 routes to that. You can apply with your own collaborative doctoral award, I would imagine if we're sitting here in December and you haven't already set that up, that will be a challenge for the January deadline. But if you're looking at next year, that might be a possibility. If any supervisors are listening, we have another route where supervisors actually write the Collaborative Doctoral Award project with the industry partners, and then we advertise that for applicants. So there's a few of those projects are currently on the Northern Bridge website, just looking to recruit a researcher to them. And that's a much simpler process because the project's already written. You don't have to write it. We just interview and appoint the best applicants. So you can also look at those if you're not sure what project you want to do, but you want to do a PhD. There may be some projects that have just recently been advertised on the Northern Bridge website. And there is a guaranteed studentship for those projects because it's already been through that process. So Rory, have I left anything out? I've talked really quickly because I know I only had 5 minutes.
Yes, no, it's very comprehensive. You're sticking around for a wee while, Karen, in case there are any questions?
Anybody contacts me afterwards, we're here to read drafts, help you with them. If anybody's interested, contact me afterwards. I'm on the Belfast campus.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Karen. That's great. And this, as Karen indicated, we also have for Economic and Social Research Council 9 DTP. So the process and the opportunities are similar, but certainly don't put in two identical applications if you are thinking about applying for both. And do make sure to talk with potential supervisors, postgraduate tutors or research director in advance before submitting. I skipped over that quickly because I do want to give a chance to some of our colleagues who are here to speak about areas where we have particular research strengths to speak about. And I suppose one of the reasons to come to Ulster and Ulster Law is a very strong research culture in law, but also more broadly across the university. And our researchers did allude to, for instance, the wonderful Doctoral College, which organizes several hundred training events every year. And the work of the Doctoral College and supervisors and PhD researchers at Ulster has been recognized in very pleasing statistics in terms of postgraduate research student supervision. But why law at Ulster University? Again, it is the strength of our research. PhD is, after all, a research degree. And in our most recent UK Research Excellence Framework assessment, an impressive 82% of our research was assessed to be world leading or internationally excellent, with 50% of our impact and 40% of our outputs being assessed at the highest level of world leading excellence. And we have produced really imaginative work, including work involving film and human rights advocacy, and very impactful work, including research that has shaped or helped to shape the social security system in Scotland, for instance. And we have some areas of particular research strength, one of which is the Transitional Justice Institute, and its director, Professor Siobhán Wills, is here. So Siobhán, I don't know if you want to turn on your camera and say a bit about TJI.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Am I there? Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'll just say a little bit about the TJI, Transitional Justice Institute, and it looks at issues of transitional justice, as I'm sure you know, otherwise you probably wouldn't have been on this call. It's situated within the law school, and so our focus is predominantly law related, but the TJI team is very diverse, and it includes experts from outside law, including psychology and sociology, and that gives you the opportunity to undertake a PhD that combines law with another field. Looking at the law side, what areas of law do we have expertise in? Mainly international and regional law, including obviously its application to domestic contexts, such as, for example, the legacy of the conflict here in Northern Ireland. Within international law, we have expertise in international human rights law, international humanitarian law, international criminal law, feminist analysis of international law, and third world approaches to international law. And we also have expertise in regional law, with particular strengths in issues pertaining to Northern or North of Ireland, South America, and South Africa. And the opportunities include a wide range of topics, for example, peace processes, peacekeeping, memorialization of the past, especially traumatic past, conflict-related trauma, legacy crimes, for example, relating to past conflicts here in Northern Ireland or elsewhere, past dictatorships, past abuses by the state or by the church. If you're aware of, in Ireland anyway, there is issues relating to abuses by the church. Refugees, migration, asylum law, economic, social and cultural rights. We have quite strong expertise in the right to health. Claire, who is new to the TJI and is brilliant, wonderful, has very strong expertise in right to health. Use of force, use of film as a research method. And in my view, we're a pretty good team. We have an excellent head of school in Esther McGuinness and an excellent research director in Rory. And that provides, I think, the base, scaffold, whatever word you want to choose, for a very strong sense of collegiality within the TJI, amongst staff and the PhD community. And I think that's very important for your experience here as if you come to do a PhD, because the PhD is a long and lonely road. And it's important to feel that you belong to a community that you can call on within, obviously, to have a good relationship with your own supervisor, but the supervisor is just the supervision team is small, and to have a community that you can reach out to and feel not so alone if you want to discuss certain aspects. I know when I did my own PhD, which wasn't here, but it had a sense of community too, that I went to others with expertise in the field to talk about certain particular chapters that I wanted expertise on this or that, particularly one chapter that I wanted expertise from beyond my supervision team. So I think that's very, it's one of our strengths that there's a good collegiality here, which isn't the case with all universities. What else would I say? Just thinking about listening to talks coming up and that have come up, in the idea that you're doing a PhD that is new and original. I think that it's important to tease out what that means when you're thinking about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to find something that nobody else has ever written about. It's originality, in my understanding of it, is really bringing voice to the field and producing a body of work that brings your focus, your viewpoint on some aspect to the table, to the field of research. And the second part of it is a significant contribution to that field. And therefore, in writing your program, and certainly in writing your PhD, you need some awareness of what has gone before and how your project, your proposal, will fit with what people have written before, and either build on that or challenge it, advance it, in some way, see a different lens through it. So it's not necessarily that you have to go around finding something that nobody has ever written on. It's finding your voice about that and bringing your voice to the field and producing something that makes a difference to everybody else's work and to the collective work of the field. Okay, that's me.
Thank you, Siobhán. That's great. And so Siobhán is director of the Transitional Justice Institute. We have a multiple award-winning Ulster University Law Clinic, and associated with that, we have a strong record of research in law and social justice and socio-legal research. So Professor Gráinne McKeever is Professor of Law and Social Justice. Gráinne, do you want to say a few words about research in this area?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I won't take up too much of your time. There's a lot that's been said already that applies to the research that we lead on. A lot of this stems from and is connected to the law clinic, but goes beyond it. So the clinic itself is part of a master's program where we train students to provide advice and representation at tribunal for employment and social security disputes, and in court for family law disputes. And so what we're interested in there is not just the kind of the pedagogy of clinical legal education, but the application of law in real life. So the socio-legal dimension of how does law work in its context, and what are the problems with it, and how can they be addressed. So there's a lot of empirical work that's done through the clinic's social justice research. And by empirical work, of course, I mean, you know, finding new data, creating new data sets, and lots of innovative methods that have been used to develop those empirical databases. So a lot of what Siobhán has said obviously will apply in terms of the kind of community of researchers that we have. Our research areas are slightly different, although there are some overlaps, particularly around economic and social and cultural rights. But we're interested in a kind of broad area of social justice. So it's really broadly defined, and we have everything from looking at the rights of carers, looking at disability, looking at particular aspects of social security, looking at special educational needs, looking at devolution, the impact of devolution on language rights. We have human trafficking in there through one of the 9 scholarships that Karen has talked about. And we're interested, you know, not just in the subject area of, you know, access to justice, social justice, litigants, you know, how people interact with legal systems, how legal decisions are made, but on the methodology that you bring to that. So it's not, it can be a very simple doctrinal exposition of, you know, what are the legal issues, and you can bring originality to that. But we tend to have a good generation of researchers who are keen to explore new methodology, and what we are able to provide in supervision is a research team that have quite a lot of experience across different innovative research methods. So that's always really exciting and interesting, that we're supervising some, you know, unique projects that you know, that take you places that you didn't necessarily expect to go, and that you've still got the need to produce original and rigorous social scientific knowledge. We have a small community of researchers across the law school, so they do all interact, and there is a good overlap in programs. So the What's the Crack seminar series, for example, one of the PhD students that I supervise runs that, and so it goes across the piece. And in terms of being able to access, as Siobhán has said, being able to access expertise, obviously when we're judging the applications that are there, we're going to pick applications where we know we have expertise to support you. And we work really closely with our PhD students. I mean, they really are very much part of our research community. So I mean, we had a meeting yesterday of the social justice researchers, and all our PhD researchers were there, you know, contributing the ideas on what we needed to do to develop, on strategy, on, you know, options for applying for funding, all of those things. So you become part of an academic community as opposed to something outside it. And one of the other things that we are particularly good at, I think, is helping to guide your career. So it's not so much, you know, a kind of case of, oh, you'll do this for 3 years and then, you know, do keep in touch. There is a very strong action on our part to look out for opportunities for you during the PhD, but also beyond them, to direct you to postgraduate, postdoctoral rather funding opportunities, to look at where your research could go beyond the PhD. So it's not just a kind of 3-year contract with us and you're done. There is an ongoing relationship, and we are really lucky that 2 of my PhD students are now 2 of my colleagues. So it's a really kind of lovely environment to grow into and to create. And I've been I feel genuinely really lucky to have colleagues who I've worked with from the start of their academic careers right through to where I now defer to their expertise, because they've been in this game long enough to have their own skill set that I need to be cognizant of. So we do work closely with the university to make sure that the PhD students are treated well. We had a PhD student during COVID, for example, who had significant caring responsibilities for children with life-limiting illnesses, and she needed to switch to part-time study, and we were able to negotiate then on her behalf with the Department for the Economy to change her stipend to allow that stipend to be taken on a part-time basis. It's not normally something that happens. but we will advocate very strongly for our students and for their support. So, but it's because, as I've said, we see them as very much part of our academic community, and that's something that we want to be a thriving and enjoyable community. And, you know, aside from all of the, you know, the things that you must do, it's good crack. You know, it's a really nice, friendly environment, and we do, you know, there is good banter and good fun, and you know, a nice, lovely bunch of lads. What can I say? Father Ted put it best. So happy to take. I've got some outstanding queries that have come to me. Apologies, I haven't been well, so I haven't been able to deal with them all. But happy to take any questions either today or subsequent to this if you want to get in touch.
Thank you very much, Gráinne. Thank you very much, Gráinne and Siobhán. And at this stage, we've talked about some of our centres of research excellence and the vibrant research communities there. I did want to ask Professor Cath Collins if you could say a bit about writing the research proposal, because as we signaled earlier, that's an especially important part of your application. Cath, over to you.
Thanks, Rory. I know we're nearly out of time, and yet this is one of the key things that you need to produce if you're actually thinking of applying. So I'll just talk about that, and I pretend to get distracted. I promise I won't do that. So let me just talk about what it is we expect to see for the part of your application that's called the research proposal. There's lots of other chunks. Leah made a good point. There's lots of admin, getting paperwork together. Try if you can to keep them on a separate tracks. So, you know, do a little bit every day on the admin, getting the kind of transcripts and all that. Try not to leave your proposal till the last minute. Try to be, you know, doing a little bit of work on that as well as you go, checking in with it, sharing it with people, maybe sending it to potential supervisors. Because it's really important part of what, the more you give us to assess and the better crafted it is, the much better chance you give yourself. And I think a proposal that fits what I'm about to sort of show you would be adaptable. And Karen made the point, it should be adaptive. It will be adaptable for anywhere you want to apply for and for any of the different schemes. But if you've got a good, coherent, solid research proposal, we know that here's someone who understands the process of doing research and of designing it and putting it together. We all know that the exact question you answer, the way you do it, it's all going to change. You said, but I don't know yet, because okay, but you're showing us that you know how the building blocks work and that they need to fit together in a coherent order, which is not always the same order, but it gives us the chance to understand that here's a person who appreciates the process. So that's really why it's so important. And these are the things that we've identified anyway as what will help us to kind of help you and get the best sense of possible of what you can do. So it's not designed to be prescriptive to sort of make you put your idea into a straight jacket that you'll never be able to escape from. It's all renegotiable, but at the moment it helps us to know that you understand what this is all about. Okay, and so we, you know, we as in the people in the law school that will look at this, eventually we don't care about the admin stuff. We've got people who do, and they need to. They know all about that. What we focusing on is, okay, who is this person as a researcher, what are they interested in, and how do they put things together? So that's why these pieces here are what they are, and it comes from people wanting something, you know, because when we didn't give people anything, they were struggling to know what to tell us. So these are the pieces that can go in different order around the particular thing that you want to research. So some kind of preambles there about the kind of length and all that, I won't bore you with that, but the kind of content, you know, a tentative title for the project, we know it'll change, don't worry, but it, you know, something that makes sense. A research question, you know, what is it that we don't know? What is it that you think we will know, you will know, and the world will know at the end of your project? And making yourself turn it into a question is a really useful exercise. So kind of, well, I want to do something about Colombia. Okay, well, you know, no, that's too vague. Make a question, something you think needs to be found out about Colombia, whatever it is. As I said, it might change, but formulate it as a question, and that shows again that you've identified some kind of knowledge gap. Something about, so literature review, call it what you want, something that says, I haven't just sat and thought about this, you know, over a beer. I've read something, so I thought I want to do something about Colombia. Well, why? You know, what have I read about? But when I read, I've already read about it. Hopefully, go and look at what's been published. Look at the most recent research. That will tell you what questions people are asking about Colombia. That will tell you what we already know about the north of Ireland and its administrative, and show us that you know about that. So you're imagining yourself as a researcher in this issue alongside lots and lots of other people. helps us to know that you know that other people are working on this and that you see them as colleagues, that you see how to place yourself in this field. You know who the big names are. Now, this is not about just kind of trotting out the same old reference points. And you can be international, you can use global South epistemologies. We don't just want you to say, oh, I'm going to read, Professor McAvoy, I'm going to read Professor O'Connell because they're from TJI and that must be the people to read. No, I'm going to cite Professor McKeever because she's the person on social work, but she is definitely. But it's about saying, I read something about this and my sense of what the questions remain to be answered is based on knowing something about what's already out there. Okay, so you're not starting from scratch, and that's where you can say with more confidence, not what's missing or what you can have, Who do you see yourself sitting alongside when you research about this subject? Okay? And I'm surprised how often people don't do this. Part of that is telling us who you are, as in what's your discipline. So we're interdisciplinary, we really are. Lots of people say they are, we really are. But you need to know what discipline you are. So, I'm trained in law, I'm also trained in social science, therefore, I'm going to do sociological studies, but I'm a political scientist, I'm an anthropologist. What disciplines are you trained in? Because that affects the kind of questions we ask and the kind of questions we know how to answer. So this is where you signal that all of that by saying I've been reading these people, because they are the jurists who know about this, and I see myself as adding this because I'm bringing an anthropological perspective on everything. Okay. Methodology, I'm writing about this all day, but I won't. Again, it's about proposing some methodology or some methodological alternatives that make sense, that would fit for this kind of project. There are many different valid ways of producing knowledge about a particular subject. So in suggesting some of them, again, you're telling us that you know that those things exist and you know that some of them fit better than others. Again, you'll get more methods training, you might make different methodological choices further down the line. But what you're doing here is saying, if this were my question and this were the literature, these would be the methodological tools that I would have at my disposal. And you might say, and I would need training in this one, I already have. I know I've used this one successfully for my dissertation, for my undergrad dissertation. So you're showing us, here's the wardrobe I propose to build. Here are my kind of raw materials in the literature. And here is the toolbox that I propose to apply to it. The methods that I know about, the methods that I know that I will need to know about. And that's about signaling again that you know what you need to acquire and that it's viable to acquire it over the course of the project. This project will require statistical, and non-statistical SPSS modeling, and I'm trained in that, or I'm not, but I'm going to get trained in that, and I can see where that would fit in the program. If you know, why will this matter? What's the so what test? If your research has a really obvious practical application, if it has a really obvious academic application too, say that. At the end of this project, I will know this. At the end of this project, we will be better placed to design a good welfare policy. Make a claim. It can be very short, it can be very succinct, but make a claim for making a difference. And this feasibility point, this is again a point that people miss out because you're so keen on kind of just talking about, okay, what do I want to research? Okay, but think about all of the pieces of this proposal that's hanging together. Is it feasible? Can you do this project? So remember that what we see is the project. We don't know you necessarily, we might know you, but we'll try and filter it out if we do know you because we don't want to disadvantage the people we don't yet know. So we're looking at this and saying, okay, here's a project, here's a proposal, here's some knowledge that someone is proposing to produce. They've told us how they propose to produce it. It all hangs together. We can see why it would be important for the world to know about this. But we don't know yet whether this is the researcher who can do that. So don't forget to tell us things as basic as, I'm going to research on and in South Africa. I'm South African national. I have contacts. I understand the culture. Or, I'm going to go and research in Ukraine. Don't speak Ukrainian, but I'm going to work through an interpreter. And tell us about the fit between you and your project. So, I'm just coming out of undergraduate, one set of skills. I'm coming from lots and lots of practice. That's why I will have access. I'll be able to go and interview all of these judicial figures because I myself am a barrister and they know me and I have them. So tell us something about you in relation to this project and how they fit together. So those are the kind of 6 pieces that it's worth thinking about and trying to build in to your research proposal. That gives us what we need to really get a good sense of what knowledge will be produced and the person who's going to produce it. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Cath. And I do know that we are at time or beyond time, so people do feel free to leave. I do have a few minutes. I can certainly stick around to answer any questions. If my colleagues are available to do so, wonderful. But of course, if you have to go off to something else, we all understand. And we are recording this and we'll make it available afterwards. And as you'll have gathered by now, we're all very approachable by email or Zoom or carrier pigeon or any other means of communication. So any questions on anything we've talked about? You're welcome. Saul, I know you had questions about the DTPs earlier. Were they answered in the presentation?
Yeah. Oh, yes, they've been answered. Thank you. Thanks very much. And with great accomplishment. Thank you.
Well, this will all be available, as I say, as a recording afterwards. If there are no urgent questions, any of my colleagues like to say a last word of, sorry, do we have a question?
No question, but if anybody's got any Northern Bridge questions, they can contact me or I'll meet you on the Belfast campus, no problem at all.
Well, I don't think then there are any more questions. So I think, as my colleagues have said, and I think as our PhD researchers have said, the word community has come up quite a lot in the course of the afternoon, and I think we do have a really vibrant, wonderful, caring research community across our different areas of interest and different areas of activities. And I say this all the time, but as a research director, I work a lot with our PhD researchers, and certainly nothing in my professional life gives me more pride than the opportunity to work with really imaginative, dedicated, kind researchers, and to see their progress, as Gráinne and Siobhán and others so eloquently described. So I do hope you will consider more doing a PhD with us. As I say, we are all very approachable, so do feel free to drop us a line if there's any question you have or any further conversation you wish to have. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.